So I posted this video yesterday of Putin holding up a document. And this is huge because this document is a peace deal that was signed between Russia and Ukraine in spring 2022. So that's over a year ago now. So why are they fighting? Why are they still fighting? And I'm just gonna, this went viral, right? It's got 500,000 views on Twitter. Let me just play the video and then I'll continue, all right?
В Турции, дорогие друзья, Россия никогда не отказывалась от переговоров. Вот хочу обратить ваше внимание на то, что при содействии того же президента Эрдогана, как вы знаете, в Турции прошла целая серия переговоров между Россией и Украиной по выработке и мер доверия, о которых вы сказали, и по подготовке самого текста договора. Этот договор, мы не договаривались с украинской стороной, что он будет носить конфиденциальный характер. Но мы никогда его не предъявляли, не комментировали. Этот проект этого договора был парафирован руководителем переговорной группы из Киева. Он поставил там свою подпись. Вот он. Он есть. Он так и называется. Договор о постоянном нейтралитете и гарантиях безопасности Украины. Именно о гарантиях, о которых вы сказали, уважаемый друг и президент Южноафриканской Республики. 18 статей. Более того, к нему есть еще и приложение. Они, знаете, сейчас даже не буду об этом говорить, они касаются и вооруженных сил, касаются других вещей. Все прописано до единиц боевой техники и до личного состава вооруженных сил. Вот этот документ. Он парафирован киевской делегацией. Подпись стоит. Но после того, как мы, как и обещали, отвели войска от Киева, киевские власти, как обычно, делают их хозяева, выбросили это все на свалку истории. Скажем так, аккуратно и постараюсь интеллигентно выражать.
Wow. I mean, that is explosive, truly. This is explosive. This is mind-blowing. There's a little bit more that I play for you in a second, but and we'll zoom in on the document. But again, just to reiterate, he's holding up this thing that in Turkey, okay, because Turkey was hosting these talks. You remember these talks? These were the most serious attempts to get peace between Russia and Ukraine last year after the war broke out, or shall we say escalated, right? And you know, the fact that the Ukrainians have never talked about it and the Russians have never talked about it, you might be wondering, well, why is Putin bringing this up over a year later? I'll tell you why, because he's being visited right now by a delegation, right? So this is being you've got representatives from Senegal, from Egypt, from Zambia, from Uganda, from the Congo Republic, Comoros, and South Africa, right? You remember the president of South Africa saying that he wants to lead a peace initiative and he's going to go visit both Putin and Zelensky, okay? So, you know, they're coming to speak with Putin in Moscow, and he's holding up this document saying, we already signed a peace deal last year, but it's the Ukrainians who haven't held up their end of the deal. So how do we know that it's the Ukrainians who haven't held up their end of the deal, but the Russians have? Well, he's saying it, that the deal was that the Russians will pull out of Kiev. You remember they were surrounding Kiev back then. And so, you know, at the time, the media that we have here in the West, they were saying, oh, the Russians have failed. The Russians, their army sucks. They're incompetent and incapable. They can't even take the capital. So now they're pulling back their troops because they're having so much trouble. And you know, Russia is this and Russia's that. And that's actually not at all what happened. The Russians pulled back on purpose and left the capital. They left Kiev because of this peace agreement. Here's what it says here's the document that Putin is holding up. And here it is translated into English. Okay, so I'm assuming you guys are familiar with Google Translator, and so you can some apps let you feed images into them and they translate the text. So you can see here they're talking about what are the, how many troops is Ukraine allowed to have. It says here that the armed forces of Ukraine cannot exceed 250,000 people, right? How many in the National Guard? How many tanks? How many anti-tank guided missiles? How many aircraft? Okay, how many mortars, etc., etc. Okay, so it's very detailed. It's very detailed. Let me just show you here on the map. Okay, so this is from here. I got a couple of maps for you. You guys remember this is from March of last year, not this year. This is 2022, March 27th, 2022. You can see in red, of course, we always got to put the Syrian army in red, the Russian army in red, because they're evil and dangerous. So here's Kiev, that's the capital of Ukraine, and you can see here the Russian forces around it. They're gone. There's nothing now. Okay, so they pulled back and they held up their end of the deal, and Ukraine walked away from it. Now, how do we know this? We know this because, well, he's holding up the document, number one. But back then there were these reports that Boris Johnson. So we go through prime ministers like socks in England, right? So Boris Johnson was the prime minister at the time, and he just randomly happens to go and visit Zelensky, and he tells Zelensky, drop out of the peace negotiations, drop out. I don't know what the hell he told Zelensky. Maybe he fed him some lie that, we're going to support you till the end. Support, more like support the weapons industry. But, Zelensky agreed, right? Zelensky did what Boris Johnson told him to do. And, this Boris Johnson could have been simply delivering a message from Washington or, a message from all of them. Doesn't really matter. At the end of the deal, we have once again another agreement that has been signed by Russia and by Ukraine and the West and is worthless and is not being applied. And when they tell you in the media that the Russians are the ones who walked away from the peace talks, the Russians don't want diplomacy. The Russians are just warmongers. They literally signed a peace deal. And this is not the first time. We've got Minsk 1 and Minsk 2, which I'll go through in a moment. What's going on here? What is going on here? Do you know the mainstream media? Not one outlet is covering this news that I'm telling you. Not a single outlet. The Russian president is holding up a peace deal between Ukraine and Russia that was signed last year, and the media don't care. How do you not care about this? How can you rationally justify not covering this? Even if you think it's a lie. Even if you think Putin is a liar, this document is not even true. It's worthless. Then cover it and say that. They're not even touching this. They're not even touching this subject. The Ukrainian government, no comment. You know why there's no comment? Because it's true. And, that doesn't always mean that just because they're not issuing a comment doesn't always mean that it's true. But we are talking about nations here. These are goddamn countries, right? We're talking about the executives of Ukraine and, the other guarantors of these agreements. These are countries. These are national security issues. We're not talking about small fries. So why don't they come out? Why doesn't the media say anything? That for me is a sign of shadiness. They are shady. They are shady. The Russians held up their end of the deal. Ukraine didn't. NATO didn't. Let me show you this tweet here. This is from Professor Marendi, right? So he's accompanied the Iranians when they were negotiating the Iran nuclear deal, as you know, which is it involves Iran, it involves Russia, China, the European Union, Germany, France, and the UK. Okay, and so they negotiated this deal in Vienna in 2015, 2016, and then again now, right? So it's been on pause for over a year now, but he's always accompanied them as an advisor, and I've interviewed him multiple times on the channel. He's a good friend. Look what he says here. He says that this video with Putin holding up the agreement, this is similar to what happened with the nuclear deal. The United States, the United Kingdom, France, and Germany signed the deal, and Iran swiftly fulfilled all of its obligations at a heavy price. However, from day one, Obama violated U.S. commitments, and ultimately Trump tore up the JCPOA with zero consequences. You see, this is why when we talk about American politicians, what's the difference? People try to make Trump out to be worse than the others. Maybe he has a big mouth, but they're all relatively the same, right? Bush, Obama, Biden, Trump. What's the difference? And even Obama, who signed this agreement, nothing. And then Trump comes out and he tears it up because he has a big mouth and he tends to do things straight. And then Biden is back in. And keep in mind, Joe Biden, most of the people in Joe Biden's administration were in the Obama administration. They were the architects of this deal, so to speak. Where's the deal? Why, if Trump is worse than them, why won't they just put the JCPOA back into action? Why won't they just sign it? So in any case, this is another example where you can see how Western diplomats, they sign an agreement and then they don't fulfill their end of the deal. They don't hold up their end of the deal. And that is scandalous. That is a stain on these countries and their diplomatic corps that they can't be trusted. I want to show you, this is from, this was reported in Die Zeit, which is a German newspaper. And they interviewed Angela Merkel, who is the German chancellor. And she was interviewed. This is in December. Look what they said here. Look what she says here. I'll read it to you in German and then I'll translate. So she says here that she says here in the first sentence, dass die 2008 diskutierte Einleitung eines NATO-Beitritts der Ukraine und Georgiens hielt ich für falsch. So this is very important because we talk about this Bucharest summit where they said from 2008. This is Bush administration. We want Ukraine and Georgia to be inside of NATO, which is, again, it's like you're putting the Russians and backing the Russians into a corner. You're threatening them. So she says that was wrong. It was wrong to do that. But look at what she says afterwards. She then says, that wir beachten die Länder die nötigen Voraussetzungen dafür mit. Noch war zu Ende gedacht, welche Folgen ein solcher Beschluss gehabt hätte, sowohl mit Blick auf Russlands Handeln gegen Georgien und die Ukraine, als auch auf die NATO und ihre Beistandsregeln. Und das Minsker Abkommen 2014 war der Versuch, der Ukraine Zeit zu geben. So she says that even though it was wrong to dangle NATO membership in front of Ukraine and Georgia, in the end, the Minsk agreement, it was just a ruse in order to buy time for Ukraine and NATO, for NATO to arm Ukraine, for NATO to train Ukraine, right? So this means that once again you cannot take Western leaders and diplomats seriously, and that is shameful. And here is Hollande. Hollande is the French president at the time who also signed this agreement. What does he say here? This is in an interview with Kiev Independent, okay? So this interview was December 2022. So look what he says here. He is asked by the Kiev Independent, quote, in an interview with the German newspaper Die Zeit, Angela Merkel said about the Minsk protocols that, quote, it was obvious that the conflict was going to be frozen, that the problem was not solved, but it just gave Ukraine precious time. Do you also believe that the negotiations in Minsk were intended to delay Russian advances in Ukraine? And then François Hollande, the former French president, says, yes, Angela Merkel is right on this point. So if you wanted to if your argument was that, well, she's just a quack, right? Angela Merkel is just one person, right? Well, look, here's the French president who also signed this, backing her up. And backing her up in a very bad way, because this reflects very poorly on the conduct of the French and German executives and their diplomatic corps, that you cannot trust them. They sign agreements that they don't apply. So is this any surprise now that there was a peace deal signed between Ukraine and Russia that Russia, the reason they didn't tell anyone, because they were like, okay, you know what, screw this. Like we are done talking. We are done talking. We keep telling Western diplomats don't expand NATO, and they just expand NATO. They lie to us. We have proof from the diplomatic meetings, from the meeting minutes. They lie. They lie to us about NATO expansion. They keep threatening us. Salami tactic. You know, they carved up Yugoslavia, and then they try to put all these Warsaw Pact countries into NATO, like Poland, which is unthinkable at the. I mean, forget the 90s. It's unthinkable now that you have Poland in NATO. What the hell is Poland doing in NATO? Are you out of your mind? Why don't you just why not put Cuba and all of Latin America and Central America in the Warsaw Pact, or, you know, its successor now? Why don't we do that? Right? Let's make them CIS countries. Right? Why not? This is equally as absurd. But apparently we have no, you know, no, we don't have anyone with brains in the West. The people who speak in the mainstream media have no brains. They have no knowledge or even acknowledgement of history. That's how ignorant they are. Let me show you. This is also from December. This is after Merkel was you know, said these words in the Zeit that the Minsk agreements were just nonsense. Let me show you what Putin said, what his reaction was to that.
Honestly, for me, it came out of the blue. I didn't expect that. It was disappointing. Frankly speaking, I did not expect to hear that from the ex-chancellor, because I always believed that the leadership of Germany is behaving in an honest way. Yes, they supported Ukraine, they were on Ukraine's side, but still, I thought that the leadership of the German Republic, they always sincerely wanted to help with the settlement of that situation based on the principles that we have agreed upon, including within the Minsk process. And what you just said, it means that we did the right thing when we launched the special military operation. Why? Because it turned out that all these Minsk Accords, no one was going to implement them. Honestly,
kind of says it all, right? I'll play you the rest of his speech from yesterday where he's holding up the documents. But just again, please look at this so you understand what happened. That you had Russian forces that were surrounding Kiev last year, right? This is how it looked. Look down here where my cursor is in the bottom left corner. So this is April 3rd of 2022. This is where Russian forces were. Okay, everything in red was Russian control, and then everything with red in diagonal lines. This is Russian forces operating in or launching attacks there, but they don't control. So you can see here in the bottom left corner that Russian forces, they are near Kiev. I mean, you know, again, they're operating in eastern Ukraine, but they're also near the capital. Now let's look at how the map is today, right? This is June 13th, 2023. This is this week. This week. Are there any Russian forces near Kiev? Do you see anything here? Anything in red? Nothing. Zero. A child could understand these maps. A child could tell the difference. But we are dealing with heads of state like Zelensky, like Boris Johnson, no longer, and you know, the head of state is the king. But anyway, you know, these are our leaders, right? So so-called leaders in the West. They sign agreements, and then they view these agreements and their own signature as toilet paper. They don't even respect themselves. You know, you put your signature on something, and then you don't respect your own word. Then your signature is garbage. It's worthless, and you have no self-respect. You have no respect for your own person, for the office that you hold, and your own citizens and your country. That is the conclusion. The only conclusion that we can draw, you know, from Western diplomats. This is how they behave, and they've been doing this for decades now. They don't even have 1 ounce of respect for who they're dealing with, whether it's Iran or whether it's Russia, and they don't even have respect for themselves, for their own country. If you're not going to abide by it, then don't sign it. Why do you sign it? Because they're tricksters. Because they're playing games. That's why. Now, obviously, the diplomatic corps is riddled with spies and liars and cheats. Yeah, but we are not talking about, you know, some random contracts here or something. These are agreements between countries. These are protocols that carry weight, or at least we thought so. Let me show you. This is Zelensky just laughing. He's sitting he's at the same table with Merkel, with Putin, and with Hollande, I think, right? So just look at him laughing. Actually, I don't see Hollande. It's Macron here. In any case, look at him laughing his head off.
Особый статус Донбасса на постоянной основе. Необходимо, конечно, продлить срок действия договора об особом статусе отдельных регионов Донбасса. И в конечном итоге придать этой норме постоянный характер, как это и предусмотрено в Минских соглашениях.
You know, maybe if I were Zelensky, I would also be laughing at Putin after having tricked him. Maybe. But then again, I'm not Zelensky. And, I wouldn't behave like that. And, maybe someone texted him a funny joke. That's not why he's laughing. He's laughing because they have tricked the Russians, and now the Russians are done talking. And the only reason that Putin pulled out these documents and held them up is because there is an African delegation in the room with him. There are multiple countries, Comoros, South Africa, Zambia, Uganda, Congo, Egypt, Senegal, that have come all the way from Africa to Moscow to speak with him, and he respects them because he knows that he's not dealing with clowns like the ones that I just showed you here from Germany or the UK or France. People that don't respect themselves and don't respect the treaties that they sign. I really have nothing else to say. I have nothing else to say. That's it. This says everything. This tells you everything you need to know. Think of Zelensky. Why would he do this? Because now the war has been prolonged by more than a year. There are tens of thousands of Ukrainians that have been killed, if not more. It's probably more. I'm being conservative with the estimates, right? You got, 7-8 million Ukrainian refugees that have left the country. You had a shot at peace. You signed it, or your delegate signed it, right? The head of the delegation, the Ukrainian delegation in Turkey, who's dealing with the Russians, signed the accord, and then you rip it up. And instead of drawing down the numbers of your military, winding down the numbers of troops that you have, aircraft, mortars, ATGMs, etc. No, you do the opposite. You start asking for jets. You want tanks, right? You want Challenger 2s and M1A2 Abrams and Leopards and Bradleys that end up in smoke. I get the impression this guy doesn't care about his own country. That Zelensky doesn't care about his own country. Why would he sign a peace deal and then violate it? What's so bad about saying that you want to be a neutral country next to Russia? You don't understand basic politics. You don't understand that this is a country that already is surrounded by NATO countries, and this is the last straw. This is the straw that broke the camel's back. The Russians are done talking. This is the conclusion that I draw from this, because they have had it up to here with Ukraine and their backers and guarantors, just playing games with them. That's why we are in a situation of war. And I think it's really regrettable, because I'm not saying the war is a good thing. I'm explaining this to you as a journalist and as a reporter and a political analyst, that you have a country, you have Russia, that has tried so many ways, so many diplomatic avenues to avoid this situation. So many. And all we get in the end is Western leaders spitting in their faces and taking them for fools. So just remember the next time that the media tell you that the Russians walked away from peace talks, that this is a lie. And when they tell you the next time that Russia wanted this war, that this is a lie, just remember these things. Just remember that.